Shared accommodations. In the spring of 1869, I found myself boarding the steamboat Lexington Belle at Hannibal, bound for New Orleans and a position with a cotton factoring firm that had made me promises of advancement which I did not entirely believe, but which seemed preferable to the alternatives available to a young man of limited means and unlimited optimism. The position paid $40 a month and required that I present myself in New Orleans by the 15th of May, which left me exactly 6 days to complete a journey that the Belle's schedule claimed would take 4, and which I suspected would take 7 if the river was cooperative, and 9 if it was not. The clerk at the booking office was a thin man with a perpetually startled expression of someone who has spent too many years apologizing for things beyond his control. When I inquired about passage, he consulted his ledger with unusual care, running his finger down several pages before looking up at me with what I can only describe as cautious sympathy. "We have one cabin remaining," he said. "Stateroom 7. It's, perfectly serviceable." "I'll take it," I said, as I had no choice in the matter, and he knew it. "The ventilation can be irregular," he added, handing me the key. "And there is occasionally some noise from the adjacent boiler room. Nothing that would prevent a sound sleeper from resting, of course." I assured him that I was a sound sleeper, which was true, and took the key, which was heavier than it needed to be and attached to a wooden tag that someone had carefully labeled in neat script. The clerk watched me pocket it with an expression that suggested he had discharged an unpleasant duty and was grateful to see the back of me. The Lexington Belle was a side-wheeler of modest size and immodest decoration, the sort of vessel that aspired to grandeur without ever quite achieving it. The main saloon featured chandeliers that hung at a slight angle, suggesting either poor installation or optimistic defiance of gravity. The carpets were red, the woodwork was white, and everything bore the gentle shabbiness of a matron who had once been beautiful and had decided that maintaining appearances was more trouble than it was worth. I found Stateroom 7 without difficulty, as it was located precisely where one would place a cabin if one wished to ensure maximum inconvenience, at the far end of the starboard deck, adjacent to machinery that produced a persistent mechanical complaint, and positioned such that the afternoon sun would strike the door with vindictive intensity. The door itself required considerable persuasion to open, and when it finally yielded, it did so with a sound of protest that seemed excessive even for a riverboat. The cabin was small but adequate, containing a narrow berth, a washstand, a single chair of dubious stability, and a window that overlooked the river with what might charitably be called enthusiasm. My luggage, which consisted of a single trunk containing everything I owned that was worth transporting, had been delivered ahead of me, and sat in the center of the floor like an accusation. It was while I was attempting to drag this trunk toward the wall that I noticed that I was not alone. A man was sitting in the chair. This would not ordinarily have warranted particular attention, as men sit in chairs with great frequency, and generally mean nothing by it. What distinguished this particular instance was that I had been looking at the chair just 3 seconds earlier, and it had been empty, and also that the man was noticeably transparent, in the manner of colored glass or exceptionally clean water. "You can see me," he said, with an expression of such profound relief that I almost felt guilty for whatever disappointment was sure to follow. I allowed that I could, and inquired whether this was unusual. "Unusual." He stood up, which did nothing to improve his opacity. "I've been in this cabin for 6 years. 6 years. Do you have any idea how many passengers have occupied this room in 6 years? Dozens, possibly hundreds, and not one of them, not a single solitary soul, could see me. They walk through me. They sit where I'm sitting. One fellow hung his coat on me, though I don't believe he intended to. But you can see me." I said that I could, and that this seemed to please him considerably, and inquired whether he might be dead. "Of course I'm dead," he said, with the impatience of someone correcting a basic error. "What else would I be? I'm Bartholomew Reed, or Reed. The spelling was never entirely settled in my family. Late of Louisville, Kentucky, formerly engaged in the tobacco trade, and I died in this very cabin on the evening of September 14th, 1863. I expressed my condolences and suggested that perhaps he might prefer to haunt a different location, as I would be occupying the cabin for the next several days and would appreciate whatever privacy a riverboat stateroom could provide. "I can't leave," he said simply. "I've tried. I can't seem to get past the door, or through the window, or frankly more than 6 feet in any direction from where I died, which was approximately there." He pointed to a spot near the washstand. "It's extremely inconvenient." I said that I imagined it was, and began unpacking my trunk with the hope that ignoring him might encourage him to find something else to occupy his attention. This proved to be wishful thinking. "How did you die?" I asked, more to establish the basic facts than from any particular curiosity. "I choked," he said, and there was an edge of defensive irritation in his voice. "On a cigar. I was having a discussion, a perfectly reasonable discussion, with a gentleman from Mississippi about federal agricultural policy, and I may have become somewhat animated in my response to his positions, which were indefensible. The whiskey may have been a contributing factor, and I had the hiccups, which made articulating my points more difficult. At any rate, I attempted to emphasize a particular argument about cotton subsidies, took a draw on my cigar, was seized by a hiccup of unusual violence, and that was that. "I see," I said. "It could have happened to anyone," he added. I did not point out that it had, in fact, happened to him specifically, and returned to my unpacking. He watched me work with the attention of someone who has had nothing to watch for a very long time. When I hung my coat on the wall peg, he offered opinions about the quality of the fabric. When I arranged my toiletries on the washstand, he suggested alternative configurations. When I sat on the bed to test its comfort, he informed me that the previous occupant had snored abominably and kept irregular hours. "You'll find the mattress is somewhat thin on the left side," he added. "Most people sleep on the right, which has compressed it considerably. I'd recommend the left, though you'll feel the ropes." I thanked him for this intelligence and asked whether he had any other observations about the cabin that he felt compelled to share. "The water from that tap tastes of iron," he said, pointing to the washstand. "The window sticks in humid weather. The lamp smokes if you turn it up past half. And there's a board in the floor, just there, that creaks most damnably if you step on it, which you will, because it's directly in the path between the bed and the door." I said that I appreciated the warning. "I've had a lot of time to notice things," he said. The bell departed Hannibal at 4 o'clock with the customary drama of whistles and bells, and the general sense of organized chaos that attends all riverboat departures. I had intended to spend the first evening on deck, observing the river and the shoreline and the various other passengers, but Reed, I had given up thinking of him as anything else, proved to be inconveniently talkative. "That's Canton, Missouri," he said, pointing to a collection of buildings sliding past the starboard side. "Unremarkable town. I sold tobacco there once. The postmaster was a thief. Do you know anything about tobacco?" I said that I did not. "Just as well. Terrible business. Everyone involved is either a scoundrel or a fool, and I was decidedly the latter. Are you hungry?" "I used to get hungry this time of day. I can't anymore, of course. Can't eat, can't drink, can't sleep. Can't even sit properly. I just sort of approximate it. Do you know how tedious it is to approximate sitting for 6 years?" I said that I could imagine. "You can't," he said with certainty. "Nobody can. Though I suppose you're about to get a taste of it rooming with me. I apologize for that, incidentally. I don't mean to be difficult, I'm just so damned lonely I could weep if I could weep, which I can't, though I've tried." There was something in his voice that made me feel ungracious for wanting privacy. I asked him what he did with his time, given the constraints of his situation. "I watch," he said. "I watch the river. I watch the passengers. I watch the crew. I've watched this boat make 37 round trips to New Orleans and back. I know every plank, every nail, every irregularity in the paddle wheel. I know which ropes are fraying and which boilers are running hot. I know that the pilot has a flask in his coat pocket and drinks from it every 2 hours. I know that the purser keeps 2 sets of books. I know things about people that they don't know about themselves. And none of it matters, because I can't tell anyone except passengers in stateroom 7, 90% of whom can't see me, and the remaining 10% of whom think I'm a dream, or a symptom of bad whiskey." I pointed out that I could see him clearly, and was entirely sober. "You're the first in 2 years," he said. "The last person who could see me was a lady from Tennessee who screamed when I introduced myself and immediately demanded a different cabin. Before that, a Methodist minister who attempted to exorcise me with the Book of Common Prayer, which didn't work, but gave me something to listen to for an evening. Before him, nobody for 3 years. You're my first sustained conversation since 1866, and I intend to make the most of it, if you don't mind." I said that I didn't particularly mind, which was a lie, but seemed kinder than the truth. He brightened considerably. "Excellent. Then let me tell you about Louisville before the war. Beautiful city. Have you ever been?" I had not, and suspected I was about to receive a comprehensive education on the subject, whether I wished it or not. The first night aboard the Belle was long and educational in ways I had not anticipated. Reed, having established that I could see and hear him, proceeded to deliver what amounted to an oral history of his life, his opinions, his regrets, and his observations about riverboat travel, American politics, the tobacco trade, and the general decline of civic virtue. He spoke without pause, without apparent need for breath, which made sense, given his condition, and with the enthusiasm of a man who had been storing up conversation for 6 years and now found himself with a captive audience. I learned that he had been married twice, widowed once, and divorced once, the latter being a source of continuing shame to his family in Louisville. I learned that he had strong opinions about tariff policy, states' rights, and the proper way to cure a tobacco leaf. I learned that he had once met Henry Clay and found him shorter than expected. I learned all of this while attempting to sleep, which proved difficult both because of his volubility and because the promised creaking board did, in fact, creak with remarkable vigor whenever I shifted position. At some point in the early hours of the morning, I informed him that while I appreciated his company and sympathized with his situation, I required sleep if I was to be of any use to my new employers in New Orleans. "Of course," he said immediately. "I apologize. It's just that I haven't had anyone to talk to in so long. But you're right, sleep. Absolutely. I'll be quiet." He was quiet for approximately 4 minutes. "Though I should mention," he said, "that the packet Mary Louise passed us about an hour ago. She's a slower boat generally, so if she passed us, it means Captain Thornton is running the Belle too cautiously. We'll be lucky to make New Orleans by the 16th at this rate." I said that I appreciated this intelligence, but required sleep more than nautical updates. "Right. Yes. Sleep. I'll be completely quiet." 3 minutes of silence followed. "It's just that if you're late to your new position, you might lose it, and then you'd have wasted the fare for this cabin, which I'm given to understand is cheaper than the others because of, well, me, I suppose. So the Mary Louise passing us is actually quite relevant to your situation." I sat up and informed him that if he did not allow me to sleep, I would spend the remainder of the voyage on deck, regardless of weather or comfort, and he would return to his solitude. This proved effective. He made a small noise of apology and retreated to his chair, where he sat, or approximated sitting, in wounded silence while I finally achieved something resembling rest. The subsequent days fell into a pattern. I would wake to find Reed watching me with the expression of someone who has been waiting patiently for a companion to resume consciousness. I would wash, dress, and attempt to go about my business while he provided running commentary on the river, the passengers, the crew, and whatever topics had occurred to him during the night. I would take meals in the saloon, where other passengers were solidly corporeal and refreshingly quiet. I would return to the cabin in the evening to find Reed exactly where I had left him, ready to resume our conversation, though conversation implied a balance of participation that did not accurately describe our arrangement. He was not unkind. He was simply relentlessly present in a way that only the dead can achieve, having shed the need for sleep, food, or any activity that might occupy time. His entire existence consisted of waiting, watching, and talking when the opportunity arose. I was that opportunity, and he was determined not to waste it. On the third evening, as we passed through a stretch of river that Reed identified as particularly hazardous during low water, I asked him if he had any regrets about his life. "Dozens," he said without hesitation. I regret the second marriage, which was ill-advised. I regret several business decisions that seemed prudent at the time. I regret not learning to play the piano, which my mother encouraged, and I dismissed as effeminate. I regret the argument that killed me, which was pointless. The fellow from Mississippi was wrong about subsidies, but in hindsight, I should have let it go. Pride is an expensive vice. He was quiet for a moment, which was unusual enough that I looked up from the book I was reading. Mostly I regret dying in this cabin, he continued. If I'd made it to the deck, I might have had more room to haunt. As it is, I'm limited to approximately 12 square feet of floor space and whatever conversations I can extract from passengers who happen to book Stateroom 7. It's a small existence, even for a ghost. I suggested that perhaps his situation might improve eventually, that whatever force kept him confined might relent. I've been here 6 years, he said. If it was going to relent, I expect it would have done so by now. No, I think this is my situation in perpetuity. This cabin, this river, this endless loop from Hannibal to New Orleans and back. I watch the seasons change through that window. I watch the river rise and fall. I watch passengers come and go, and 90% of them don't know I'm here. That's my eternity, apparently. There was a bitterness in his voice that I had not heard before, and it occurred to me that for all his talkativeness, all his apparent eagerness for company, Reed was profoundly sad. He spoke not because he had much to say, but because silence meant acknowledging the completeness of his isolation. On the fourth day, I witnessed something that lent weight to Reed's claim about other passengers' inability to see him. A woman, perhaps 40 years old and dressed in the practical traveling clothes of someone accustomed to riverboat journeys, entered the cabin by mistake. She had apparently confused the number with her own stateroom and walked directly through the space where Reed was standing. She apologized for the intrusion and left, having shown no awareness whatsoever of his presence. Reed watched her go with an expression of weary resignation. "That's how it is," he said. "Most people simply don't register my existence. I could be standing in their path, and they'd walk through me without hesitation. Sometimes I try to get their attention. I'll wave, I'll shout, I'll stand directly in front of them, but it makes no difference. I'm simply not there as far as they're concerned. But I can see you clearly," I said. "You can. I don't know why. There's no pattern to it that I've been able to determine. Age and gender don't seem to matter. Religion doesn't matter. I've been invisible to ministers and visible to scoundrels. It seems entirely arbitrary, which is perhaps the most frustrating aspect of the whole situation. I can't even develop a theory about it." That evening, as we approached Memphis, Reed became agitated during a discussion of municipal governance. He had strong opinions about the proper administration of public works, and I noticed something peculiar. A thin wisp of smoke escaped his mouth, curling upward in the lamplight before dissipating. He noticed it too, and fell silent immediately, his expression shifting from animated discourse to something like embarrassment. He did not mention the smoke. I did not mention the smoke. We simply moved on to other topics, and I filed the observation away with the other odd details of living with a ghost. On the fifth morning, I woke to find Reed already engaged in conversation, though I was his only possible audience. "We're making poor time," he was saying. "The Bell used to make this run in 4 days, 4.5 at most. Now it's taking nearly 6. I think the boilers are running less efficiently than they did. Or perhaps Captain Thornton has grown more cautious in his old age. Either way, you might want to send a wire from Memphis explaining the delay." I thanked him for the suggestion and asked whether he ever tired of monitoring the Bell's performance. "What else am I going to do?" he said reasonably. "I can't read because the books pass right through me if I try to hold them. I can't sleep. I can't leave this cabin. Watching the boat's operations is the only interesting activity available to me." "Well, that and conversation when conversation is possible." We reached New Orleans on the afternoon of the 6th day, which was the 16th of May, and therefore 1 day later than my new employers had requested. The city spread out before us in the humid sunshine, all warehouses and wharves, and the general chaos of a functioning port. I gathered my belongings with a sense of relief that was only partially due to reaching my destination. Reed watched me pack with obvious reluctance. I suppose you'll be staying in New Orleans, he said. I confirmed that this was the plan. So this is goodbye, then? I said that it appeared to be, and thanked him for his company, which was more gracious than honest but seemed appropriate under the circumstances. Thank you, he said with unexpected intensity. You don't know what it's been like. 2 years of watching people who can't see me, can't hear me, treating this cabin like it's empty when I'm standing right here. 6 days of actual conversation, even if I did most of the talking, is more than I've had in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was like. I found myself unexpectedly moved by this, and told him that if I ever had occasion to return to Hannibal, I would book Stateroom 7 and look forward to resuming our conversation. You won't, he said, not unkindly. People always say that, the ones who can see me. They mean it when they say it, but they never come back. Why would they? Who voluntarily shares a cabin with a dead man? I could not argue with this logic, and we shook hands, or rather, I extended my hand, and he approximated grasping it, which produced a sensation like pushing through cold water. Good luck in New Orleans, he said. I hope the cotton factoring business treats you better than the tobacco trade treated me. I thanked him and left the cabin, closing the door behind me, with more care than was probably necessary. From the deck, I could see the city stretching away from the waterfront, full of promise and opportunity, and all the things that had seemed worth pursuing when I had boarded the Belle in Hannibal. Behind me, in Stateroom 7, Bartholomew Reed, settled back into his chair to wait for the next passenger who might be able to see him, and to watch the river that had become his eternity. I never did return to Hannibal. The cotton factoring business failed within 2 years, and I found other work that kept me in New Orleans and later in Memphis. I thought about Reed occasionally, wondered if he was still in that cabin, still talking to the rare passenger who could perceive him, still watching the river and the seasons change through that small window. It is possible, I suppose, that he is there still, sitting in that chair or approximating sitting, waiting for someone to see him. It is a small existence, as he said. But then, many people live small existences without the excuse of being dead, and complain more about it than he did. I have never taken another riverboat north from New Orleans. This is partly because the railroads have made such travel obsolete, and partly because I have no desire to book Stateroom 7 and discover whether my promise to return was as empty as all the others he had heard. Some things are better left as they were, even if they were not particularly good to begin with.